Congress to order. Ann, can I get a roll call? Ann's in the lobby. All right. Sound off.
Dave Brandt, Pete Merkel, Kurt Scatching, Dave Drance,
And Steve Barrett. Okay, we've got a quorum. All right, can I ask everybody to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd like to recognize some people on the steering committee that put this program together. I think we started back in September. There was a lot of planning that went into this to pull it off. If you want to stand when I call your name out, Kim Hankins, Trustee Emeritus. Is Kim in the room? There's Kim back there. Nancy Williamson, Trustee Emeritus. There's Nancy. Ken Kaler, Trustee Emeritus. I guess he's not here. Dennis Dreyer. Elizabeth Kessler, Executive Director of the MCCD. John Kramer, Director of Operations and Public Safety. Andy Dilak, Director of Finance and Administration. And Ed Collins, Director of Land Preservation and Natural Resources. Wendy Coomer, Marketing Communications Manager, the girl behind the curtain back there. And Ann Bastian, Executive Assistant. And last but not least, my co-chair, Trustee Dave Brandt. Job well done. Okay, well, I'm going to ask to have a couple of videos pulled up. Oh, and I didn't introduce the trustees, but we're going to watch this instead.
To foster a conservation ethic among McHenry County citizens, helping all of us, regardless of the basis for our interest in nature, to develop a greater awareness of our role in and responsibility for the total community of life. The total community of life. A conservation ethic asks us to assume a moral duty to become educated about conservation issues and then to act on that information. A conservation ethic is an attitude that recognizes the importance of preserving the natural heritage of the county's open space.
The 25,000 acres of public open space, protected by McHenry County Conservation District since its inception by voter referendum in 1971, represents an irreplaceable legacy to be cherished, safeguarded, and passed on to future generations of county residents. These lands constitute a natural heritage of woodlands, prairies, wetlands, streams, agricultural lands, and buffers that afford habitat for native plants and wildlife, clean and filter surface and groundwater, provide for clean air, promote healthy outdoor activities, connect county citizens to the natural world, and inspire the heart and senses with an opportunity to experience the beauty of nature. Public lands afford each of us, regardless of the basis of our interest in nature, the opportunity to develop a greater awareness of our role in and our responsibility for the total community of life, and in doing so, to adopt a conservation ethic, compelling us to assume a moral duty to become more educated about conservation issues and to act on that information. Additionally, these lands include sites and features of important native and cultural value, allowing the citizens of the county to connect with and learn from both the historic and prehistoric past, enabling them to move into the future with a strong foundation and a clear understanding of how the past has influenced the county's growth. Accordingly, we, the delegates to the first McHenry County Conservation District Congress in McHenry County, Illinois, assembled, acknowledged, and believe that the public lands of McHenry County protected by the McHenry County Conservation District are an irreplaceable natural and cultural legacy that should be passed on to future generations in sound ecological health for public use and enjoyment for their own intrinsic value. That the varied recreational uses and user groups of these lands should be bound together by a governing principle, that all such uses will have their common goal, the ecological health and long-term sustainability of the public lands upon which such activities are carried out. That differing user groups should be united in support of the larger goals of protecting the public lands of the district from misuse, environmental degradation, resale, transfer, or conversion to other uses that could destroy or diminish the ecological, cultural, historic, aesthetic, or recreational values for which they were preserved. That a healthy and vibrant civil society requires that citizens of the county have opportunities to enjoy these public lands for recreation, education, and contemplation, and that such opportunities be accessible, available, and safe. That the non-human components comprising the natural heritage of the county, such as natural wildlife, native plants, waters, and natural communities, be considered as a recognized constituent group for which McHenry County Conservation District has a responsibility to provide both a voice for and stewardship of in decisions relating to the use of the county's public lands. That farmland, orchards, nurseries, grazing, and other compatible working landscapes provide an opportunity for successful and innovative long-term conservation partnerships between protected public lands of the district and such working landscapes, benefiting both, while providing citizens important ecosystem services. That working partnerships between conservation agencies, governmental and non-governmental organizations, health providers, and recreational user groups are critical to the long-term future of McHenry County Conservation District public lands, and that such partnerships should be encouraged, developed, and fostered whenever possible. That existing funding for land preservation, recreational access, and outdoor education should be considered a regional and national conservation priority, and that continuation of programs that provide such funding should be of concern to individuals, organizations, and user groups that utilize McHenry County's public lands. That a personal land ethic should be cultivated in all those who enjoy and utilize the outdoors, encompassing not only wise use of the legacy represented by public lands, but a personal and moral responsibility that encourages involvement in their long-term protection and stewardship. That such a land ethic requires of those who enjoy today's opportunities to utilize the public lands of the county to recognize such enjoyment, and such use requires a personal commitment to intergenerational equality between current and future generations yet unborn, that we may bequeath upon them a healthy landscape, and they too may come to appreciate and cherish. That a land ethic should also include among its highest forms of commitment to introduce young people and diverse cultures to the natural heritage represented in McHenry County Conservation District public lands and to the public lands in general. That the governance of the McHenry County Conservation District shall continue to offer county citizens of all walks of life an opportunity to serve in an unpaid and voluntary trustee position, allowing them to become directly engaged in a conservation leadership capacity, and that any changes to that form of governance shall be done in a manner prescribed and envisioned by the Conservation District Act of 1963. We, therefore, representatives of the First McHenry County Conservation District Conservation Congress, assembled, deeply aware of the trust placed on us by future generations for the safeguarding of the county's natural and cultural heritage, and our responsibility to integrate an ancient web of life for which we are stewards, do solemnly publish and affirm this fundamental declaration of conservation principles, and for implementation of the tenets embodied within this framework, we pledge our mutual support, enthusiasm, and ethical conscience to the preservation and integration of McHenry County's open lands, agricultural areas, trails, wildlife, waters, and scenic beauty.
Very nice. All right, we've got a very exciting program here today with some very interesting speakers and impactful conversations. So that brings us to our first speaker. This is someone that I call my boss, and she'll beg to differ and say I'm her boss, but that's just a technicality. So please help me welcome the Executive Director of the McHenry County Conservation District, Elizabeth Kessler.
Well, good morning, everyone. I love the energy. You know, that was when we did our first Congress 2 years ago, and it's hard to believe. We had a lot of enthusiasm, and even despite on a snowy day, everybody's out here to stand up for conservation, and so important, and I thank you for that. And on behalf of the flora and the fauna, they thank you too. So we'd have them here in the room as delegates, but I think it would be a little crowded. There's likely more of them than there would be of us. But anyhow, today, as we start the program, and just some little housekeeping notes, because I'm kind of handling that as well. Refreshments will be out this morning, so if you get coffee or do that, if you didn't get some before you came in, please feel free. The restrooms are out in the lobby, and just as you walk through, past the registration desk to the left. And each of you, when you came in, have name tags, and on those name tags, there's species. And we changed it up a little bit this year. So in the morning, you have a fauna species, and in the afternoon, you have a flora species. So to keep it, if you're thinking you're following this morning and you're looking for bur oaks, well, you're not going to find them till this afternoon. So make sure that you know what your AM group is to your PM, so we get you in the right spots. I too want to give a personal thank you to the steering committee for their excellent work. Our speakers that are here, they are all here, and they're coming from across the country. Again, this is a very important topic, and we're so lucky and fortunate to have people that are willing to share their voice and to give you some great information about what's happening here across the country, but specifically the uniqueness of McHenry County. As well, this afternoon we do have lunch, and so how it's going to work, like we did last year, is you'll come in for the main session. Then after that session, your guides will lead you into specific rooms for breakout conversations. And you'll have a facilitator and then a room scribe that'll be capturing all the information. If you're a member of the general public, you are welcome to go into the rooms where the conversations are taking place. You're not a delegate, so you're not at the table, but you're there and you can listen, and then also be able to provide your comments in a written format at the end of the Congress, and again, share your thoughts with us on what's going forward. So just a little bit of that. And then in between, once those group discussions are done, you have about 10 minutes to come back into the auditorium, and then we tee it up for the next presentation, and we repeat that throughout the day. We do have a fun finale planned. As you know, last year, as you saw that video, it was very exciting to see the declaration, and so we've got something new planned for you at the end of the day. All right, any other housekeeping things that we need to cover? All right, let's get started. So, sustaining the dream and stewarding the places we love. And we are honored and excited to have so many individuals attending today's event and your interest in serving as delegates to lend your voice in helping us to shape the future. We are also pleased to welcome the members of the public who have decided to join us. This is something we've added a little bit more encouragement this year for that to occur, and we're eager to have them and to learn about their interests in McHenry County public lands. We thank you for sharing of your time and thoughts as we together stand up for conservation. And our goal today is simple, is to engage you in 4 extraordinary topics that relate to the indispensable value of McHenry County's natural areas and opportunities for outdoor recreation and adventures. 2 years ago, as we were saying, we joined together in this location, and everybody committed their personal role in preserving and protecting the places we love. We pledged our support by signing on to the Fundamental Declaration of Conservation Principles with the understanding that the collective impact of our shared vision and voice was essential for our sustained success and that of our future. Now, we designed the Conservation Congress after Teddy Roosevelt, and back in 2009, he convened a congressional commission to talk about the natural areas and the importance of our public lands. And he said, the duty of man to man on which the integrity of the nation must rest is no higher than the duty of each generation to the next, and the obligation of the nation to each citizen is no more sacred when the obligation to the citizen to be, who in turn must bear the nation's duties and responsibilities. So since we met 2 years ago, we did meet last year, and we did a state of conservation at the Lost Valley Visitor Center, and we brought the groups together. One of the things with the Congress, it was not going to be a one and done, meaning we brought you together, we had a lovely day, we got a lot of ideas, and we did nothing with them. We did. We took your ideas, and we aligned that with our strategic plan, and we worked to enhance and amend programs and activities and services based on your feedback. We implemented several new programs and activities, such as Run Wild for open space, the Great Outdoor Beer Trail, and the $10 Wide Open Spaces Places That Matter vehicle sticker, which I believe are probably outside if you would like to purchase one if you have not done. But we also had a lot of implementing conservation practices on the land, and we preserved an additional 156 acres with more than $1 million in grant funds through the Illinois Clean Energy that's now known as our Monastery Marsh. So even though we don't have dollars to do acquisition, we've got a lot of friends and partners and places that believe in our mission and are contributing. We also have been working with shared services with the McHenry County Division of Transportation, another agency across the county line, the Boone County Conservation District, and Open Lands, a private not-for-profit, to put in a shared canoe launch. And that is key. Again, we don't have to duplicate. We're smart, and you work through things, and that's what the district has great pride in. We also made great strides in increasing awareness of the district and attracting diverse audiences and a new generation of conservationists, monitoring and adapting to changes in federal, state, and county government, and strategizing how to build and fund conservation operations of the district. Now, during the same time period, we have witnessed extreme climate events that have devastated families across the country and here in McHenry County, from flooding events along the Fox River, disruptive weather patterns and happening at a faster rate. And you don't have to look outside and how you got here today or 2 days ago when they were saying it was going to hit and it didn't hit, and you know, it's unpredictable and we can't tell. We've seen hurricanes along the coast, we've seen wildfires out west, and everything seems to be out of order, chaos, and off balance. We've also been embarrassed to see Illinois touted as one of the nation's worst states to live in, accompanied by sound bites alleging that people are leaving the states in record numbers due to the number of units of local government and high property taxes. And why those statements are factual, I would say that what can we do as conservationists, and conversations and opinions and important decisions are based on e-news blasts and briefs with the amplified voice of the minority. And when does it become good marketing strategy to position your assets as liabilities? We need to turn this around. And as ambassadors, we need to take action with our collective voice and reposition our messaging. Instead, we need to get a conversation going about the amazing, tangible, and intangible benefits of conservation areas and what they provide to the local economy, our health, and well-being. Conservation lands provide real-time solutions and are very cost-effective and efficient. Not to mention the concerning conversations and actions to dispose of public lands that are to transfer them or to sell them, allowing fundings for the Land and Water Conservation Fund that help many of the sites that we've acquired and opened here in McHenry County, to funding a national wildlife refuge that we have, Habitat. Our public lands are under attack, and like never before. And until we speak out and stand up, they will continue to be under siege. And people and businesses are standing up together to protect our wide open spaces and places that matter. It's our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and it's our personal responsibility to pay it forward and preserve and protect for the benefits to present and future generations. Now, for a moment, if you would for me, have everyone close your eyes. And imagine if the wide open spaces here in McHenry County, the places you love to hike, to paddle, to fish, hunt, ski, horseback ride, snowmobile, camp, and watch wildlife were suddenly closed and no longer available for you or your family to enjoy because maintenance of the costs and the infrastructure improvements for staff and resources were not in the budget or at adequate levels, and whereby the silent majority and our elected officials sat idle, making a conscious choice to not invest in McHenry County's natural and cultural heritage. You can open up your eyes. This is not the McHenry County I want to imagine. This is not the McHenry County where people want to live or to visit. This is not our McHenry County. And we have a choice and responsibility as our health and well-being depends on it. We are all interconnected, which you will hear throughout the presentations today from all of our great speakers, from the value of nature and the ecosystem services they provide with Brian Daly from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, for funding the dream, the value proposition from Kevin Roth, who's the Vice President of Research from the National Recreation and Park Association, for keeping water in the ground and out of your basement with Jason Tomlinson and Daniel Abrams from the Illinois State Geological Survey, and then last, on geotourism, outdoor recreation as an economic driver with Liz Ogilvie from the American Sports Fishing Association. As I said, it's a dynamic group, and you're going to learn a lot. So when we think of McHenry County, we conjure up a vision of community, country life, and outdoor living, from rivers to ridges, with wetlands, savannas, prairies, and open corridors, which connect us, our sense of place and shared values of stewardship. We think of experiences and action verbs such as walking, hiking, and paddling on more than 25,000 acres of protected public open space. McHenry County Conservation District lands in general support a vibrant recreation economy and are home to more than 2,000 different species. In fact, according to a recent study that looked at current species data found in the flora of the Chicago region and compared it to 59 U.S. national parks, they identified two inspiring facts. First, it is the Chicago region, defined by a 75-mile radius from downtown Chicago, that it ranks #1 in the number of native and vascular plant species as compared to the U.S. national parks, right here in our own backyard. Secondly, the combined protected natural areas with a narrow 50-mile radius of downtown Chicago ranks 25th in acreage, greater than 35 national parks, including Grand Teton, the Rocky Mountains, Mount Rene, the Badlands, Zion, Bryce Canyon, the Arches, and Acadia. And according to Jerry Wilhelm, a renowned botanist and ecologist and co-author of the Plants of the Chicago Region, quote, "No other great metropolitan region on the earth has such a diversity of natural beauty with an easy drive of its citizens." So why do we do what we do? Well, we do because we were created by some very wise citizens back in 1971 through a referendum, and we operate very fiscally responsible as a unit of government, but a very essential unit of government to protect our public lands. And we're very distinct because McHenry County's natural areas make us very different as compared to what you would find in conservation districts in general. There's only 5 of us in the state of Illinois. And so while we're similar to what our surrounding forest preserve districts, it's by mostly governance, and we work with less of a budget to do what we need to do. But we have just as much land to take care of and a lot of natural resources. So we have 33 sites with public access improvements, and we have many projects that are underway, but those projects are being funded privately through grants and donations. And examples, we have our Brookdale multi-use equestrian parking lot and trail that's going in, again, paid for and assisted through a grant, and then also raising funds through the Equestrian Coalition of McHenry County, our McHenry County Conservation Foundation, and the McHenry County Community Foundation. We have the Gap at Oak Street with the Ridgefield Trace, and the McHenry County Bicycle Advocates rose up. They assisted in raising private funds, as did the community, McHenry County, Nunda Township, and the Division of Transportation, and again, the McHenry County Community Foundation. So great projects of communities pulling together, public and private working together to make a difference. In this slide, it shows of the 25,000 acres or more that is preserved and protected by the district. When we began, we had 2 successful referendums in 2001 and 2007. And as you can see, the EAV in McHenry County was growing rapidly at the time with development, and so there the voters said, yes, we want to protect open space. But as the funds were expended, then the line went across to the budgets have been flat, and so we have not been acquiring property, but there's more property to be acquired. We also are actively managing our natural areas, and just a little bit of background information here. We have 13,000 acres of the 25,000 that is in active management through natural resources. We have another 2,000 that's in our CRP and Joint Grassland Venture Program, and then another acres that are with our agricultural leaseholders. This slide, I think, tells it well. So if you can take a look at the green area, that's 50% of the 25,000 plus acres that we have that's under active management. The other 20% is in row crops, so we have farm lease with our ag leaseholders, and that property stays on the tax roll. We have 2,000 that are in the alternative agriculture, which is 8%, and then we have 21% that's unmanaged, meaning they're protected and preserved, but we don't have the resources or capacity to begin any restoration to take care of those lands. And that 1% represents the hardscape of the public access improvements through trails and parking lots, et cetera, that are on the land. So we only use up 1% for the built environment, but the natural areas. So we're making great progress in that front. We're having conservation impact. Our field of dreams, back to Kevin Costner and the baseball field, well, we have fields of dreams here in McHenry County, and we're seeing more and more visitors at our sites, humans and wildlife. And it's not uncommon to see sandhill cranes, red-tailed hawks, deers, eagles, and rare encounters with a Blanding's turtle or a rusty-patched bumblebee. In this past May, 3 trumpeter swans stopped over at Glacial Park, and in October, the district hosted a whooping crane and 400 sandhill cranes at Glacial Park Marsh. 6 white-faced ibises had flown off course during the hurricane and found their home and respite here at Glacial Park, black vultures, and a pair of trumpeter swans at Brookdale Conservation Areas. Now, these discoveries are rare, but they're becoming more frequent. And so the restoration work is having impact, it's making a difference, and is drawing visitors to our sites to take care of the lands from all over the regions. Research and monitoring is very important to our conservation work and in the country. And from head starting, smooth green snakes, Blanding turtles, and most recently the fluted shell mussels in a partnership with the DuPage County Forest Preserve District, you're hearing this similar theme. There's impact, there's shared services. We're not doing it alone, but we're working collaboratively and with our partners here, which we're so great. We also are conserving our wild ones in places that matter for our next generation. And today we are honored to have joining us a youth delegate to the 2018 Conservation Congress, Junior Ranger Ada Fry, and she is the most decorated Junior Ranger of the National Park Service. Ada, would you please stand to be recognized? She is 17 years old and is a resident of McHenry County, just in our backyard. Think we had any making a difference here on the work that we do? I shall say so. We also have Jonathan here somewhere. He was our youth delegate for last year, very involved with having us start our race of Get Wild. So let's talk about impact. Let me talk about ambition of our millennial generation here, the next gens. In just 7 years, Ada, she had visited 305 out of the 417 national parks, monuments, seashores. As an ambassador for our public lands, she shares her enthusiasm for the dream and the splendor of America's best idea, traveling around the country with her parents, Sean and Norma, who are here today, speaking to children and adults about the importance of connecting with nature and the great outdoors and protecting our public lands. She is an inspiration to us all, and she's even written a book, believe that or not, and it's published, and it's America, Can I Have Your Autograph, and is working on her second. Recently, I had the honor to interview her on the radio show that I do. I host with Huntley Community Radio, Wide Open Spaces, and we talked about what her aspirations were for her career goals. Not a surprise. She wants to be the boss, and she wants to have my job. So, Ada, this is awesome. She wants my hire. She's going to be National Service Parks Director, and she does a lot of volunteer work and that with Indiana Dunes and Pullman. So I know she's got great ambitions, and she's going to do it. But if you were born after 1982, then you're known as the millennials and next gens. And you know what? That's an interesting generation. They're back to where we have a great opportunity for us because of the World War era. We kind of sandwiched in between with the boomers, and the boomers are raising amazing children. And these children, they are engaged in social initiatives, they're engaged in the environment, and they believe in actions over words. So we have a great future, and I'm really excited about that. We have a strategic plan, and this aligns with the work that we do, and really, as you can see here, protecting our public investments, diversifying revenue, growing participation, enhancing partnerships, and of course, investing in our staff, because our staff and volunteers is how we get the work done. They have a big job, and I just am so lucky to have such an amazing all-star team. Now, I know I'm kind of going over, but I've got important stuff, so I'm just going to go with it. And I'm up here, and I got the podium, so I'm going to keep going, guys. I'm getting the numbers back up there. So with that, you know, the fabric of America's neighborhoods. So this is really good for a marketing study, and the reason why I bring it up is because it's really important to know who our McHenry County is and what our fabric is. And across the country, Esri, who is the Environmental Systems Research Institute, does demographic sampling, and they compare all the neighborhoods in the country, socioeconomics, demographics, gender, age, et cetera, and then they're able to pull that. A lot of it's geospatial, which we can pull in, which you'll see through some of the presentations today, but there's different things about our markets in consumer spending and what they invest in. And McHenry County, very interesting, which I'm going to talk about, of the 67 tapestry segments across the country, the top 3 from McHenry County are Green Acres, which is a group, it's a lifestyle group, Soccer Moms, and Parks and Recreation. Interesting. Don't you find that interesting? That is the fabric of McHenry County. Now, if we go to community, you can pull up different demographics and different groups and neighborhoods. Target segmentation is going to happen. But the individuals, and they're going to have different areas, and you can go out to list, and this is just a real quick list of all the different groups of where they're at, just to where we sit. And the Esri has, which you can have, and I will upload this to your guidebook, but the specific information is about the groups, so of what they're doing. But they're into outdoor living, they're into gardening, they're into camping, they're into hunting, they're into bicycling. They like to do it yourself and fix it up. They're very involved with community. And so that is the larger population. And as we look towards knowing what McHenry County and why they're in support of the work that we do, I think it's evident by the demographics show that. It also shows, when you look at these things, just an example of where the clusters of the Green Acres are. And so up on the Lake Michigan here, the Chicago Wilderness region, for all the work that's doing where that cluster is. Pretty interesting. Okay, so outdoor and active, healthy and livable communities. We're strategically positioned, and we provide opportunities that are of value to McHenry County residents. And we are currently working with our planning department and McHenry County Health Department on an initiative that they've started called Cmap, to get people outdoors and active and to connect our transportation for other ways. And I think it's a great initiative, and we're glad to be at the table and helping them lead that initiative. I think it's pretty spectacular. So district lands are destination points. We do believe that, and that's another strategic goal, is to how do we get people. We care about the economy. It's really important. And so we're looking at creative partnerships. Obviously, the biggest partnership with the destination draw is our National Wildlife Refuge and the Friends of Hackmatack that have been very involved to make that happen here, the first refuge in the Chicago Metropolitan, in the metropolitan region, which is pretty cool. But also for other special events and campgrounds, horseback riding, all those areas and sites have destination visits. The district is also exploring another opportunity. One of our sites, Fox Bluff Conservation Area. Currently, the district has not opened the area that was formerly the Camp Algonquin. And again, we're looking with a private partnership, early stages of the process, with an open house and information meeting to take place later this month. You can pick up a flyer. But for private funds to be generated that would invest in public spaces to allow public access and to have an opportunity to camp and differentiate the types of camping that we offer at the district. And so you'd have an opportunity in, if this goes forward and we get support and all can work, whether it be in an airstream, in repurposing those historic structures over at Fox Bluff. And we're really excited about that. And I mentioned the events before. So just as I'm closing on a couple things, I want to talk about, though, funding your wild and what does it cost to operate the district. And it's really a great investment. And so today you're getting a fact book that if you haven't picked up, please do so. But it's really important. We are primarily supported through property tax dollars. And every dollar a resident pays in property taxes, approximately 2 cents is paid to the district. That's 2 cents on every dollar. Now, we know that property taxes, and when those bills come in, it caused concern for consternation, and Illinois is funded differently than other states across the country. But only less than 1 cent of your 2 cents goes to managing your open space, all the activities, educational programs, the maintenance, the trails, less than 1 cent of that. The other, that's just a little bit over that 1 cent, goes to pay off the debt service that the voters approved to purchase the land, and that was done through referenda. And that has an end life. That will drop off in 2026, and more than 60% of the property taxes that you pay to the district will be gone. It's going way down, 60%, 60, that's not 60, 60%, I have to, 60, that's big, that's big for the little amount that you pay. When you look at the district's allocation of dollars, 89% comes from property taxes, remainder from user fees, license and grants and donations, and then we do cost recovery on some of our programs and some lease agreements, as we talked about with the agricultural lease, or if we got into a public-private partnership on lands for that. But the district does not have the ability or the flexibility to fund operations and services with other tax or non-tax options. We don't have the ability to raise sales tax, we do not get motor or fuel tax, hotel motel tax, and we don't have any money that comes to us from the state of Illinois through local government distributive funds. So we're dependent on how we work, and so we do a great job, and I'm going to tell you that story because of that. As I said, of your bill and what we pay each year with our budget, and this is based on 2017, 52% goes to service the voter-approved debt, 22% is allocated for conservation and recreation, 9% is for general administration, 8% for land preservation, 5% for public safety and risk management, and then 4% to do the reinvestment in our capital infrastructure, and that makes up where your expenses go. Now, I find this very interesting, too, because we talk about our neighboring agencies, and we're fortunate we selected the type of government here in McHenry County to be a conservation district, and our local forest preserve districts do excellent work. We are partners. But for fact-based, and to take a look at it, I wanted to really go in and zone in on what we're doing. And I think it's a key point to know for the acres that we manage of the 25,540, and we take the actual property taxes for funding operations, it comes to $305.18 to fund each acre that's managed, okay? And on average, if we took the same using the other 4 forest preserve districts and we average around the collar counties for their acreage, which is very similar on average, some have more, some have less, it's $685.78. So we are 55% less than our other forest preserve districts that surround us. So it's amazing, pretty amazing. Now, over the years, our acreage has grown with voter approved, but our staff has not. We've held the line on staffing. So that's one of the reasons why I think our numbers and our budgeting and what we do, we don't see those per acre because we're not increasing the staff to do the work. We're maintaining and we're staying within what we have, and we've got a great volunteer corps here that care very much, and that helps supplement what we do. The amount of money that's raised through seed collection, volunteer hours, when you put that into labor, it's pretty spectacular. But that's how we're doing it. That's how we're doing it. But we are doing more with less, and this is the 4th consecutive year that the district's total property tax levy has either been decreased or not increased from the previous year. And the reductions have had impact. The district is doing less with less, not more with less, but we are getting creative, and staff may differ whether we're doing less with less, but we really are because we're not keeping up with the management on the land that's there. You saw the areas that are unmanaged. We have trail investments and things from a 10-year capital plan that need investments, and we've absorbed, when we aren't taking property taxes to what we're allowed, then we're absorbing that. And so just in general absorption with inflation, we've saved $1.6 million that had we taken what we could have, our budget would be $1.6 million more money to which to work with, and that represents an 18% reduction of our operating budget that we have not taken. So how much is your wild worth? How much is it really worth? What is it worth? So this is a value proposition question. And I took this, I was kind of driving around, and nothing against McDonald's. You could look at Dunkin' Donuts, you can look at Starbucks, and really it's a position of your personal, what resources that you have. So I'm not putting judgment, but I just, to demonstrate a point, if you were purchasing a coffee or a sausage McGriddle, or you had on your way in a sausage egg burrito, they've got options for $1, $2, $3 of what you're going to get, and you make choices, and maybe you visit there. But it's a value proposition. You're choosing to spend money when you go to McDonald's. And for the district, our value proposition on a per capita basis, and this is the population stats that are taken from census that's built on ESRI, which I talked about for 2017, is $2.33 a month. $2.33 a month. Remember that number. When Kevin gets up and talks about the national studies that he's going to do, you're going to be floored. You're going to be floored. $2.33. Let's take it a little bit further. Less than 8 cents per day is what it costs to protect and preserve your wild open spaces and places that matter here in McHenry County. Less than 8 cents a day. So I say supersize me, right? Let's supersize me, and let's make those investments, because it's de minimis in the scheme of things, but I think it's really important. We have a responsibility to the residents of the county, including the flora and the fauna, to protect what we have. Those investments, if they go for too long, they're going to be liabilities and be concerns. They're not going to draw the visitors in. They're not going to draw the wildlife that comes to visit. It's not going to help sustain the groundwater, which you're going to hear about, and it's going to end up in your basement. And so it's really important that we do what we do. Just for a little bit, I want to also just reflect on some individuals that passed and were very influential in the district in its starting. Ken Fisk, who was the first executive director of the McHenry County Conservation District, passed most recently. Don Shellhouse, who was the second executive director for the Conservation District, he passed as well. And again, we're very instrumental in the start of where the district was. We lost a long-term volunteer, Barb Wilson, known as the Fen Lady at Lake in the Hills, would be out there every day working and helping to seed collecting, to plants of concern. Took citizen stewardship, was there, integral part, did amazing work. Phil Wozniak, who helped our police with our SWEEP program, and helped out when you were at the kids in the events teaching the Festival of the Sugar Maples that's coming up on what it meant in the natural history and cultural history, and was there lending a hand. And Kevin Click, helping to monitor our bluebirds and see what changes are happening. And this goes on. This is all of you. You're here because you're stewards. And I just thought, when the sunshine is to flowers, smiles are to humanity. And we have a lot of smiles. And people care very much about the district and our conservation lands, and so important. So we see ourselves, there's opportunities, we're solutions to real-time issues, and we're relevant in the work that we do. And we are McHenry County Public Lands. We're complex, but really important. So I thank you on that. Just a little bit of background of the district. As we move in now to congressional sessions, it's my honor to introduce Nancy Williamson, who is going to introduce our first speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth. At the beginning, about 2005, Chicago Wilderness looked at mapping our natural resources in the 28-county, 4-state area with green infrastructure mapping. At that time, it was hand-done. A lot of people in this room, including Dennis Strayer, who was instrumental in that, helped make that happen. Cmap at that time, our Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, was approached by Chicago Wilderness and embraced the concept of mapping natural resources, surprise, surprise, because they do exist and we do need them. Later, it became imperative that we brought it into the modern world with graphic information systems and GIS. And so that very hard task was taken on not only by Chicago Wilderness and the Green Infrastructure Task Force and many people, but also by Cmap as our partner in that. Brian Daly is an associate planner with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. And he is here to talk about some of the work that Cmap was instrumental in doing with that new green infrastructure mapping and with modeling that went behind the GIS mapping. They were able to put valuations on that. With Cmap's help, with a great deal of backing, we were able to do green infrastructure mapping thanks to Dennis Sanquist and Daryl Moore, with the county and the Conservation District and the people who have participated in that. So Brian Daly is one of the very bright staff members of Cmap. I can't say enough good about Cmap. And he is currently working on the next iteration of Go to 2050. Specifically, Brian is working on something near and dear to us. He's working on the natural resource conservation policy strategies, land use, local food, and climate resilience. And Brian is also an on-the-ground guy looking at local technical assistance in the area, including just a completed Fox River corridor planning with the village of Algonquin and Carpentersville and the counties surrounding that area. So I'd like to introduce Brian. He's going to give you the dollar value behind our natural resources.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Nancy, for the warm welcome, and thank you all for joining us today, and thanks for rolling out the white carpet for us this morning. Again, I'd just like to, I think, log into the computer. All right, and thank you all for being here, for being part of this conversation. As Nancy said, my name is Brian Daly. I'm a planner with Cmap, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. And I'd like to talk today about the value of the services that the natural areas in McHenry County and the Chicago region provide to society, and some methods and tools that we've developed for assessing them. So the basic question we want to ask is, what is it worth? This is Glacial Park. It's a simple question, but I think there are a lot of ways to answer the question of what this is worth. It's worth something to us that we can't quantify, something about the beauty it enjoys. It allows us to enjoy the habitat that it provides for flora and for fauna, and it is part of our history and our heritage. Beyond all that, it does provide some tangible benefits. It provides ecosystem services like cleaning our water, protecting the places that we live, and providing the things that we need to survive and to thrive. Our natural landscapes are worth a great deal, and we can measure some aspects of that. This morning, I'll be talking about an economic argument for conserving our natural resources. It's based on the concept of ecosystem services, which can be assessed and valued in economic terms. It's not the only argument for conservation, but it's an important piece of it, and we think it's an increasingly important piece, and it can be persuasive to a wide range of audiences. So a little background on Cmap and why we work in this field. Cmap is the official regional planning agency for Northeastern Illinois, for the 7-county region surrounding the city of Chicago. We cover 7 counties, 284 municipalities. We were founded in 2005 by the Illinois General Assembly. And our mission is to create a unified region with enviable quality of life and economic vitality for all. So how do we do that, and how do our natural resources fit into that? At our core, we are a transportation and land use planning agency. But those topics obviously have implications for housing, for economic development, and for the natural environment. So here's a graphic to just show a little bit of how transportation and land use interact with each other and how transportation affects the way our land is developed and used. Here you can see that prior to 1900, the developed area in the Chicago region was mostly concentrated in the city, in some pockets along the lake, and along some of our major rail lines and rivers. Since 1950, that development has dispersed much more widely, mostly due to automobile transportation. As that development has spread to cover a greater percentage of the region, that has led to a lot of conversion of land from a natural state or an agricultural state to a developed state. One of the main things that we do at Cmap is big picture regional planning. Go to 2040 was our first comprehensive regional plan for Chicago that was adopted in 2010. It includes strategies for livable communities, human capital, efficient governance, and regional mobility, with an overall aim of directing development in a more efficient and sustainable form. It includes some goals for conservation and open space access, including conserving 400,000 acres of open space across the region, achieving a goal that each person in the region will live somewhere with sufficient access to recreational open space and conservation open space, and also creating greenways and trails to help people access those areas of open space. Achieving these targets requires a better understanding of the condition of our natural resources and where those natural resources are located. We're following up on Go to 2040 right now with On to 2050. This will be our next regional plan. We've been working on it for the last couple years. It's scheduled to be completed and adopted in the fall of 2018, but a lot of the strategies and draft materials are available at our website now. A full draft plan will be available in June. And some of those strategies include conservation, but also looking more deeply at green infrastructure, large areas of green infrastructure like conservation land, but also green infrastructure in our neighborhoods, in our denser areas, and how those affect water supply, stormwater, and climate resilience. As Nancy mentioned, we also have a local technical assistance program where we bring this big picture regional planning down to the local level, working with local partners around here. That's included the village of Algonquin, Harvard, Crystal Lake. We've worked with McHenry County on a number of projects, including right now we're working on a follow-up to the Fox River Plan version 1, where we're going further north up to Burton's Bridge. So we've worked in McHenry County quite a bit. Natural resources are always a big part of our work out here. And we look forward to keeping that up as we finish this regional plan. So before getting into the details of McHenry County's natural resources, I just wanted to do a brief overview of a little bit of the landscape and how it's changed. This is a map that shows what the landscape looked like before development. And you can see that, so the darker green is forest, the lighter green is prairies. Those were the dominant land uses here. You'll also notice there were quite a few wetlands present. That's the kind of golden brown color. And in short, the county was wet and it was flat. And when you look at how that has changed over time, looking at the current land cover, here the golden color is agriculture. So compared to some of the other counties in the Chicago region, there's relatively little development, but there's still a major change in how the land is being used from natural to agricultural. You may also notice that there's far less wetlands now than there were in the pre-development land cover. And that water still has to go somewhere. It's still somewhere nearby. So keep that in mind when we talk about ecosystem services and what these natural areas can provide. So getting into the details, we have the Chicago Wilderness Green Infrastructure Vision, which has been around in one form or another for quite a few years now, and it's been refined over time. And what it is essentially is a map, a spatial data tool that shows us where our natural resources are and what types of natural resources those are. So this is all publicly available data. If you have the software, you can seek this out and explore it on your own. It's also been used by a wide range of partners in various applications over the years. It was developed by Chicago Wilderness, an alliance of public, private, and nonprofit partners who are committed to protecting and restoring nature in the Chicago region. It identifies landscape types, namely forests, prairies, wetlands, and water bodies, and where those resource types are distributed throughout the region. It takes an approach of looking at cores, hubs, and corridors. So those cores are larger, unfragmented pieces of natural landscape. The hub is kind of an area around those cores that can insulate it from the impacts of development. And the corridors are functional connections between these cores and hubs that allow species to move through them, that allows connectivity to keep the landscape from being too fragmented. The GIV has informed our work in transportation planning. It's informed our work in local planning. And the ecosystem service valuation study that I'll be exploring a little bit more here enables us to make better, more informed evaluations based on the GIV. So in around 2012, we undertook this project to quantify the contributions that green infrastructure make to our regional economy and our quality of life. So this was added as kind of an enhancement to the GIV in 2012 to quantify what services are being provided to society and what the economic value of those services is. The study was led by a nonprofit, a national nonprofit called the Conservation Fund, working with Cmap and our partners from around the region. So what do we mean when we talk about ecosystem services? There are kind of four major categories that we can sort them into. But the basic idea is that our forests, our wetlands, our prairies, and our water, they support our existence. They provide services like cleaning the air, filtering water, preserving agricultural soils and other important soils, protecting our settlements from stormwater and from flooding, and maintaining our water supply. So we can kind of group these into several major categories. One of them is products. So this would be things like the yield from fisheries, the fish that are there, or the yield from cropland, the products that those provide. That's one service that the ecosystem is providing. Regulating services are sort of natural forces that these natural areas help us to manage as a society. So that would be something like flood protection. The natural areas help regulate water in a way that protects us from flooding. Supporting services would be things like oxygen production, so things that support life and support our society by cleaning the air, by helping to create soil that can be used for agriculture. And then lastly, but significantly, cultural experiences. The place that these lands and waters have in our lives, the recreational value that they provide, these are important as well. All right, so now is when it starts to get a little bit wonky, but I think this is important background to have when we talk about how we're really putting a number behind what these lands are providing for us. The hard part of the study is how you value these services. It's easy to say, wetlands help protect us from flooding, but how much do they protect us and what's the value of that protection? So the study looked extensively at academic literature and studies that have been done to put a price tag on these services. And it identified 6 different ways that you can value different ecosystem services. And the 2 top ones here are the ones that we relied on the most. Avoided costs. So what does a service allow you to not spend money on? This would be something like the damages from flooding. If you can say that a river or a pond or a floodplain is protecting this number of properties from being flooded, and you can think about what the damage to those properties would cost, then the value you're providing there is avoiding that cost of recovering from a flood. Replacement cost is what it would cost to create infrastructure to replicate the same service that this natural area is providing. So if you look at something like filtering water, cleaning water that's entering a waterway from our roads and our infrastructure, what would it cost to build a water treatment plant to provide the same thing that those natural areas are providing? And to briefly go through the other valuation methods, factor income is looking at how much these natural resources are contributing to people's ability to earn an income. Again, fishing is sort of an easy way to think about this. You know, how much of an individual fisherman or fisherwoman's income is based on the fish that are provided by this ecosystem. Travel cost, how much are people willing to pay to visit these areas? So you can think about this in terms of recreational access. You can do a survey to see how much money people are willing to spend, how much they value coming here. Hedonic pricing is looking at the different components of what goes into the price of a good. So the easiest way to think about this is housing. So there are various preferences that go into what you're willing to pay for housing. The quality of the schools, the number of bedrooms, how far it is from your job. But what percentage of that or what amount of your price preference is based on being close to parks, being close to natural areas. So this is something that studies have looked at. And then contingent valuation is sort of based on doing surveys and asking people how much would they be willing to pay to have more wildlife or to have more natural areas nearby. So these are some of the valuation methods that emerged from looking at the research. And we applied that to 9 different ecosystem services that we identified as being available from natural areas in the Chicago region. These and for each of these 9 services, we identified measurable outcomes. So we looked at water flow regulation and flood control, water purification, groundwater recharge, developed areas keep water from infiltrating into the groundwater table. Natural areas allow that groundwater system to recharge when there's rainfall. That's an important ecosystem service, particularly in an area like McHenry County, where many people are dependent on groundwater for their water supply. And carbon storage. The carbon that is in our atmosphere increasingly can be stored by our trees and our plants. So what's the value of that service that's being provided? So we identified studies that measured these outcomes in economic terms, like avoided costs and replacement costs, which we talked about on the last slide. And we looked especially for studies that looked at the Chicago region where we could. For some of these, there aren't studies based on the Chicago region, so we had to look at national studies because that was the best alternative. The other services that we looked at, native flora and fauna, the value of the wildlife that's present in our natural areas, recreation and ecotourism, air purification, microclimate moderation, does it cool, having a tree canopy helps cool the air and allows households and businesses to spend less money on climate control, and then looking at increase in property values. So these are the 9 services that the study looked at. We couldn't actually apply each of these to the map for various reasons. For example, for recreation, we can see that there is a dollar value on recreation, but we couldn't really break it down into how an individual piece of each landscape played into that, like how much is the recreation value of a prairie versus a forest. There aren't really studies that tell us that. So we can talk about relatively that natural areas attract ecotourism, but we couldn't pin it down to how much of that could be mapped according to the GIV. So we took the information on how much economic value a service provided and tied that to how much of that service each of these landscape types provide, your prairies, forests, wetlands, and water bodies. And so, because the services are different depending on which type of landscape you're looking at. A wetland and a water body provide a lot of flood regulation, whereas your forests provide more carbon storage. But using the GIV, we could see how much of these landscape types were available where, and make a tool that could tell us how much ecosystem service value they were providing and how much that's worth in economic terms. So looking a little bit at what that shows up as on the regional level, this is for the full 7-county region, flood control is the most valuable of these ecosystem services. Per year, we estimated that the Green Infrastructure Vision lands and water provide $4.2 billion per year in value of flood control. The most effective ecosystems for this are wetlands and streams. Groundwater recharge was the second most significant ecosystem service on a regional scale. This was an extra $1.5 billion per year. Floodplains had the highest value for groundwater recharge, followed by wetlands and lakes. Water purification, another $634 million per year, and wetlands, again, are the most significant resource for this service. Carbon storage is $2.3 million per year, and forests and woodlands provide the most value for this. And this looked, this study was, the value for carbon storage was based on looking at places where carbon trading has been implemented and seeing how those markets worked. If in places that are sort of like California and New England that had carbon trading markets where carbon emitters had to invest in offsetting services to take away some carbon from the atmosphere, we looked at what price was put on that in a place where this was actually being traded as a good. And then native flora and fauna, which we can make a map showing which areas have the most support for flora and fauna, but again, we couldn't easily put a price tag on this. Which is a drawback, because these lands, especially when you're talking about lands that are protected by a conservation district or a forest preserve district, they have significant recreational value in addition to their conservation value. So ideally, we would love to be able to express that value, but that was just beyond the scope of this particular study. And recreation and ecotourism, again, similarly, we can say that Illinois residents in a given year spent almost $4 billion on wildlife-associated recreation. We just couldn't break that down by detailed analysis into what parts of the region were driving that. And again, that's a statewide total, not a region-wide total. So the value of the total ecosystem services that we were able to study amounted to $6.4 billion per year. This is a number that we would consider an underestimate of the true value, because there are services that we weren't able to quantify. It also doesn't include urban green infrastructure, such as street trees or green areas of neighborhoods, school campuses, things like that. Those weren't part of the GIV that we were looking at, so then they're not part of this valuation as well, even though they make a major contribution. And then the other big one that this doesn't include is Lake Michigan itself, which contributes a massive amount of ecosystem services, but was not included in this study. So now we can also look at what this means for McHenry County. So if you look at all of the ecosystem services that we quantified as part of this study that falls within the boundaries of McHenry County, it comes out to $1.34 billion per year. That's more than a fifth of the total value of ecosystem services for the entire Chicago region. Almost 900 million of this, so well more than half of this, is from flood control. The next most significant ecosystem service is from groundwater recharge, and that's another 300 million. So those two services right there are providing most of the value that we captured in this study. And you can look just in terms of what's being provided by lands that the McHenry County Conservation District holds, and that's $260 million per year. Which is more than 4% of the total value for the region and about 20% of the total for McHenry County. So about 20% of the value of ecosystem services in the county are being protected now by McHenry County Conservation District. And expanding that to look at other protected open space, including the county conservation district, but also municipal parks, park district holdings, land that's under conservation easement, that moves the total up to $350 million per year, which is about a quarter of the total ecosystem services for the full county. So this is just showing how the total county land and water resources compare to what's protected. The top chart is showing just the number of acres. So there's almost 400,000 acres in McHenry County, and these are the totals for acres for the different units of conservation holdings. And then looking at the ecosystem service value, again, it's about a quarter that's under protected open space and about a fifth that's in the conservation district. So what does this all mean for protecting and conserving our ecosystem services? We have the opportunity to secure additional services by protecting, restoring, and enhancing the natural lands that are currently conserved, and for strategically acquiring future holdings. When the time comes to acquire land, we hope that studies like this can help show which lands might be strategically valuable to help make that argument in a referendum or before the public about why this matters and why it's important to do this. So analysis like this isn't perfect, but it does at least give us an idea of where conservation is most needed and where our most critical natural resources are located. Beyond conservation, in our regional planning work and our local planning work, beyond acquiring land, there are a lot of other strategies for protecting and increasing ecosystem services. The GIV is really looking at green infrastructure at its largest scale, big complexes of many, many acres. But urban and suburban areas have a lot to offer as well. The tree canopy, both on private property and on public rights of way, parks, campuses, office parks, people's yards, those all have ecosystem value, and protecting that and enhancing that by planting native vegetation, by increasing community-level green infrastructure can add a big boost as well, even if it's not necessarily showing up in this study. And it's not just about placing these lands under protection, it's also about steering development to areas that won't impact these natural resources. So when roads are being aligned, when developments are being sited, we as an agency have always really stressed the benefits, the economic benefits and the conservation benefits of directing development to areas that are already served by infrastructure, so that you can attract jobs, attract population, while also maintaining these natural areas. And we think that mapping it out like this can help people make the most informed decisions about development. So what is it worth? If you take anything away from this discussion, I hope it's that the natural areas are worth exactly $1,341,539,400, which is obviously not true. We could never pin it down with that kind of accuracy. But if you do take something away, it's that these lands and water do provide critical, irreplaceable services, and we have them right now. And they are much more expensive to replace than they are to protect. And taking advantage of the services that our natural areas already provide to us is a cost-effective approach to infrastructure that also creates numerous community benefits beyond what is captured by this dollar figure. Having these lands available, being able to visit them, seeing the wildlife that they support. But as we continue in a time where public resources are scarce and strategic investment is crucial, it's worth spreading the message that there is an economic value of these resources and that it's significant. It's not their only value, but it is a big part of the picture. So again, thank you. All this data is available, including reports that explain the method in a lot more detail. If you're looking for detail, you can access that on the Cmap Data Hub, or if you just search around a little bit, you should be able to find it. I'm always happy to talk about it, and I hope this was informative, and I'd be happy to take questions if we have time for questions. So. Sure. That's a good question. I think part of the challenge is that there are studies out there that probably do look at the value of individual species and things like that, but aggregating that at the regional level across, I think we would probably shy away from picking individual flora and fauna and adding that. It's especially since this is meant to be a really regional level analysis, it's more meaningful if you can aggregate it as much as possible. So I'm not sure. I imagine that there have been studies and that probably there are more studies of that topic now than there were in 2012 when we were doing this work. But that's a great point. You know, there are certain types of flora and fauna that have a clear value to some of the products and services that ecosystems provide. And certainly if we ever revisit the methods and the studies for this, that would be a great one to look at.
I think we have to start moving to our...
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you to Brian. What wonderful information. So now your guides will be at the sides of the rooms, and you know your species, and so you need to find your fellow species and group together and then go into the breakout conversation rooms. Hopefully you'll have a good discussion.